next, of course, let's talk biggest surprise. And for my surprise, um, this was a bit of a tough one for me, but I think my biggest surprise here was the lack of competition that we saw in the preliminary finals. It was two games that were just two duds, and where we saw Geelong get Port Adelaide get absolutely blown out. Now with Geelong, I wasn't as surprised. I think they had the most disappointing performance of the finals, or maybe you give that one to Brisbane for losing two in a row there. But then Port Adelaide, the team that I'm not bagging on you, but you included, thought that they were going to make it to the grand final, and that was very fair to say. They looked fantastic during the regular season. Then they get to this point again where back-to-back years now, they blow it in the preliminary finals, and so I thought that was very disappointing in my opinion.
See, I'm gonna throw a blanket. My most
Mm.
disappointing. You pretty much said all three of them. My most disappointing were three teams of the finals was the Brisbane Lions because they had played so well to get into fourth and they fall in straight sets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, the second game against the Western Bulldogs was quite an incredible game, but even
Yes.
still, straight sets.
Yep.
The Geelong Cats, because again, they find a way to absolutely stuff up another finals appearance
Yep.
by just falling apart at the worst possible time. And in a game, there was yes, they were playing the D's. Yes, the D's were one of the best teams. Yes, they're the champions. But I was expecting so much more out of the Geelong. I thought the Geelong D's game was going to be the best game of the preliminary finals, legitimately.
Mm.
And the Port Adelaide Power again for I mean, literally stepping on their own feet at the almost optimal time to get to a grand final. You're the only team that's playing at home. You're the only team that's going to have the home crowd advantage. And you absolutely stuff it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was ridiculous how
Mm-hmm.
bad Port Adelaide. Like, I, 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 I don't. I hate the narrative that they were overlooking the doggies, but if you go back and watch the game, it was almost as if Port Adelaide kind of went in that game thinking, "Well, we should win. We're going to win this." And the doggies, they're not going to put up a fight. We're going to go to the grand final. And the doggies punched him in the mouth, and Port went, "Uh oh," but they then never responded. It
Mm-hmm.
was the most inept performance I
Anticlimactic.
have seen. Yeah, anticlimactic is kind of perfect too, but it was inept. Like I could not believe what I was watching. Like we that was the one we watched, and I was sitting there going, "Where is the Port Adelaide performance that that happened in the first game of the finals?
Mm.
Like where was that? Like it was not there." So I hate blanketing saying three teams, but all three of those teams, in my opinion, were the most disappointing because
Mm-hmm.
they all had just brain fades at the worst possible time. It's absolutely insane. And to see Geelong's kind of coaching staff implode now ever after that game
Yeah.
is kind of insane. Like Matty Scarlett leaves, another couple of their coaches leave. So it's just, I'm interested to see how Geelong's coaching staff looks next season after bomb out in the finals, and it sounded like it caused a few rifts amongst their coaching staff that led to a few guys not returning next season.
Yeah. That you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Now, with a little bit of positivity, let's talk surprise. And to me, given that they were 0-3 and they weren't looking good going to the finals, and to be admittedly, I did think that they were the scariest team in the finals and probably one of the most unpredictable ones in terms of possibility of success. But the Western Bulldogs surprised a lot of people because, and like I said, they were limping into the finals here. Then they just rattle off a big win against Essendon, a really well played close game against the Brisbane Lions. They blow Port Adelaide out of the water, and they come at least through most of the game. They came really close to winning a flag as a non-top four team, which almost never happens. So I have to give a lot of credit to the doggies for showing true resilience and grit, and for not giving up on the season there at the end because they played fantastic and had an absolutely amazing year this season.
All right. So my surprise is how to explain this. It's a surprise for me, but it's the reasoning for my surprise that it's gonna
Okay.
throw a few people off. My
Okay.
surprise is the Melbourne Demons,
Mm.
and let me explain here.
Yes.
My surprise is because the offensive juggernaut that showed up for the D's in this finals was not something any of us saw, at least from round 12 on this
Mm-hmm.
season. The scoring that they did again, Max Gone kicking 5 in the preliminary finals, Bailey Fritz kicking 6 in the grand final is not something you could prepare for. So that's why it surprised me, because this has been a Melbourne Demons club over the last 3 years that has been, shall we say, less than accurate kicking goals. Them and the Brisbane Lions were two of the teams that led the league the last few years in behinds kicked because they weren't accurate goal kickers. So for me, the surprise is how dominant offensively the D's became
Mm.
as this finals progressed. It was shocking in a good way
Mm-hmm.
for to see this team that I think everybody said the defense is fantastic, and that's great. But if you can't score, you can't win. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew one of the things that I got on the D's about was is that their inconsistency scoring might hurt them in the finals. And boy, did they find it at the right possible time. So my surprise is the D's offensive output in the finals, because they exploded at just the right time. And that is one of the big reasons
Mm-hmm.
why they are now the premiers of 2021.
I love it. I love it. I mean, kind of that first statement will catch everyone, but like you said, the explanation really did it in, and I mean, we all knew that their defense was going to be great. Offense, a huge question, but I think they passed that test, Donnie. You think? Did they pass that one?
Well, well, and the other thing too is did you hear the story that came out connected to the defense that I think a lot of people are still kind of shaking their heads and fascinatingly surprised about.
What would that
Remember, I
be?
was telling you Stephen May came into this grand final with an injury cloud,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
They diagnosed later that he actually did tear his hamstring early in the second quarter, and he played through it. He has a 7 centimeter tear in his hamstring. So they don't know if it was a slight tear and they didn't catch it during the scans during the off season, but during the 2 weeks off, they said, but he played most of the game with a hamstring tear because he didn't want to come off because he knew that they didn't have the defensive replacement as their injury sub. So Stephen May played with a torn hamstring for most of that game.
Now that's not a strain. That's not a sprain. That is a torn was it ligament.
A torn
Ligament.
hamstring. Yep.
Yep, that is a torn ligament that essentially holds your leg together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What an
that came out. Yep.
animal!
Yep. I kid you not. Stephen May, one of their best defenders. They later came out. It later came out over the. It's come out like the last couple of weeks that he basically played most of that game with a torn hamstring. It's come out over the last few days that he basically played on because he knew that there was no way they would be able to play as good a defense if he came off. Yeah, the
What a
secret weapon.
beast!
Yeah, absolutely
Man, give
insane.
him the Norm Smith.
Yeah, in the second quarter, I heard it in quote from an article on the in the second quarter, I heard it again. Yeah, a solid tear. Described
Mhm.
it as a solid tear. The star defender knew he had done something against the Cats, but had wanted to be given the scan. Chose not to be told the result, so he actually had it even going into the final. So,
What an animal! I don't think
yep.
people understand, like, the amount of pain that causes is ridiculous. And for him to still have mobility in that, too?
The good thing was that most of that second part of the second half in the fourth quarter, the
They're on
ball was
off.
mostly on the other side of the field.
Right.
So he it probably wasn't as bad. It might have been much worse if the Duggies had kept that close.
Oh, but man,
But
that alone, that is one of the stories of the
it's
season.
the only thing that scares me a tiny bit with that though is that did he do any more damage to it, and will this affect him going into next season? We'll have to see about that.
For me, something like that shouldn't take too long.
It's a great Iron Man story. It's a
Mm-hmm.
great playing through pain story. I mean, you and I are hockey people. I mean, we hear stories all the time. A guy breaks his leg but stays on the ice for
Finishes
a
the
shift.
shift.
before he comes off and then he's done for the season, but he played
Mm-hmm.
through a broken leg, all that.
Right, you see guys
It's
with like
those
torn
stories.
ACLs, everything broken.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. I mean, like some of the
But
lists, like even like football and stuff like that, the list of injuries you get that people play through is just some things are mind boggling. So hats
mhm.
off here. That's one hell of a story, right?
Yeah, but the only worry I would say is that will it affect his off season because of the fact that the finals goes late enough
Mm-hmm.
that will it affect his preseason? He probably will get scans, will probably get surgery if
Mm-hmm.
necessary. He should be back, but that's the only thing that I question sometimes with that
Mm-hmm.
is will it affect his career
Of course.
long term? But an incredible performance
Mm-hmm.
for him to play that on and be still a pretty darn good effective
Yeah.
player in most of that grand final when he did have to have
Mm-hmm.
the footy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he might be delayed in his progress, but the end of the day, he won the flag. So ultimately, that's the goal of 99% of these footballers out here. So hey, he got it done, and that's ultimately what matters.